are you doing today?
Hey, it's Scott. How are you doing? I'm well.
Fantastic. Where do they have you placed on the planet today, sir?
I am in Regalsville, Pennsylvania, Bucks County.
Very cool. Hey, I got to tell you something. This book is so important to our present place of music because I was just reading up on a study that one of the majority listeners of classic rock radio stations today are the young adults, the Gen Zers, and they don't have that leadership role of knowing the real story until we get books like this.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm happy to do it.
What drew you to this book? Because, I mean, I was horrified when we lost Casey Kasem and Dick Clark. They were my storytellers as a kid. But it's you, Scott, that steps forward to make this happen.
I mean, I've always loved, music of that era, the 1960s particularly. But I love I love post-war pop music, from 50s R&B. Through the 60s, all the British invasion, the folk rock music like the Mamas and the Papas, doo-wop, 70s singer-songwriter. So it's just, and I enjoy storytelling, so it was just an incredible mix of the two.
Well, I'm a firm believer that your last book, All the Leaves Are Brown, about the Mamas and Papas, is a very big reason why so many people are being drawn to that. Because I just recently had a conversation with Mama Cass's daughter. And all the way through that interview, I kept going, do you know about Scott? Have you read this book?
Yeah. She just put that out a couple months ago. Yeah. And, I haven't had a chance to read it because I'm writing my own book, another book right now. But, I know it's interesting to hear the perspective. I know she talks a lot about the fallout from the death of her mother within her own family, which to me, that sounds incredibly interesting. I'm sure it resonated. It probably still does.
The impact of Like a Rolling Stone. It was such an interesting time in music history. And here came this guy who had kind of a strange sounding voice, but he knew how to share a story.
He sure did. I mean, he was an incredible songwriter, had developed into one, in his early 20s, was a star of the folk circuit, the folk boom movement that the Mamas and the Papas were all a part of, and so many other later stars, of pop music. And, he just took that next logical step to rock and roll. He had grown up as a rock and roll fan, loved the first generation of rock and roll, and decided it was time for him to enter into that forum. And, Like a Rolling Stone, it was off his second Electric album. And it just catapulted him into the stratosphere.
How do you define the word folk artist in the way that I think that for the longest time I've been telling people that I think that we're in another one of those folk rock movements with people like Taylor Swift and even Ed Sheeran. They're storytellers, but do they qualify as being a folk artist?
I think they are, descendants of, what people like Bob Dylan and so many others from that era became. But Dylan was focused on just old-timey folk music from Appalachia to the South, and it was a mix of blues and folk artists like Woody Guthrie, and sharing stories of life coming up through hard times, through depression. So I wouldn't say it's the same thing, but it's for sure an offspring of that.
Yeah. I was shocked to learn that this song was 6 minutes and 7 seconds. I mean, how did AM radio even put up with that?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, they had high hopes for that song going into that session. When I say they, I mean Bob Dylan and his producer Tom Wilson and even Columbia Records. But it was 6 minutes, and then they tried doing it faster, singing it faster, and bringing it down into the 3-minute mark, something a little bit more releasable. But it just took away from the song. So. This guy, a young guy named I forget his name, but he was a promotions man at Columbia, and he found a discarded acetate in the garbage of the song, and he took it to this local club. It was a celebrity club that was run by one of Richard Burton's ex-wives named Sybil, and he just had the DJ there play it, and it got such a rousing response from them, and. They played it until the acetate wore out because they weren't designed to go for a long time. Right. And in the audience that night were a couple AM DJs from two big New York stations, and they called up Columbia, wanted promotional singles, and they started playing it on their stations. And it was, only a couple weeks later, Columbia decided to go ahead and press the single, and within a month, it's in the top 100.
See, and listeners need to know this was pre-FM radio. Because FM didn't really start to materialize until the 70s.
No, yeah, this is. You had FM, but it was. It was not no, yeah, it was nothing like we know now. It was almost kind of like experimental stations for the big AM stations. I know Dan Ingram was a big top 40 jock on WABC in the 60s in New York, and he had a show on WC's FM channel where he could play jazz music on the weekends. And WNEW had the first all-female talk radio channel on the station on the FM radio that had Sally Jesse Raphael. So I think it was very experimental, and in the late 60s and early 70s, it kind of became the premier spot for cutting edge music.
Yeah, because I was at a radio station in Billings, Montana back in the 70s, that was a daytime station. We used that FM station to further our music beyond that date, because once that tower had to come down and shut off, we went to our FM tower so that we could stay on. Yeah,
right. Yeah, there's limited range at night for FM. I don't know why, but you probably know better than I do. But it's like, okay, time to power down and go over to FM.
The greatest thing about this book is that you give us that image of Bob Dylan before the fame sets in. And that, to me, is what's missing from a lot of this. It's the same thing with the John Denver story. We know him for the hits, but I want to know the misses or the things that happened before people started, falling in love with them.
Yeah, that's always my interest. That's the starving artist period is always kind of more fascinating to me, because that's really what makes an artist. It's kind of like right now I'm writing a book on Waylon Jennings that focuses on his first 15 years of his professional career, where he really struggled. He was a superstar in the 70s, but from the late 50s through the 60s, he struggled a bit. And that to me, that is the makeup of an artist, that resolve, and it comes out later on when they become stars.
Are you going to talk to his son, because he is an incredible conversation?
I have reached out to him, and I know his manager, so I'm hoping to hear back from him soon.
Oh my God! Because to me, that's part of the journey as well. What happens after the legend, is there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. How do they handle the fall off? And every artist who has had success has experienced that, especially even the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and they had their lulls.
Did you find it interesting to tap into how people assumed they knew Bob Dylan with a song like a Rolling Stone? It's almost like people said, yeah, that's Bob. I'm following Bob. But they didn't know jack about Bob.
No, that's always the case, and I know seeing many interviews with Bob Dylan, I know that things like that kind of get on his nerves, and it's understandable. But it's part of the game. Most people don't pay attention; they just see what's in front of them. They don't do the digging, they don't do the research or study the back catalog. So they're just kind of in the here and the now and on to the next thing. So I think when you go into entertainment, you gotta kind of accept that.
I've got a new podcast that talks about all the crazy things our parents told us. And one of them, the focus before this conversation, was about how a Rolling Stone gathers no moss. And right away, when I started doing the research for Like a Rolling Stone, I'm going, well, this is a Rolling Stone as well. It did not gather moss, but it gathered fans.
It sure did, and I think it continues to do that. It's a hugely influential song. It's just one of those songs when it comes on the radio, man. It just, I don't turn it off. My toe is tapping, and I'm singing along to those crazy lyrics, and we can all probably just sing it almost as good as Bob.
Would you say that Bob Dylan was one of the first when it came to being a mystique, a mystery? People didn't know enough, because I feel like that Led Zeppelin had to get it from somewhere, but it had to start, and I believe, from Bob Dylan.
Yeah, for sure. He wasn't, he wasn't out doing commercials or jingles, or I know he was supposed to go on Ed Sullivan, but when they told him he couldn't sing the song he wanted to sing, he walked off. That was out of the ordinary for a lot of the singers in that day, because they are always very amenable to working with those kind of people, because they were those were the people who promoted your record and helped you sell 1 million copies. So I think Bob, he was a very genuine kind of guy, and I'm sure there was a part of him that was happy to sell 1 million copies and make millions of dollars, and but I'm sure there's also part of him, probably more than the average star, it was just okay to walk away from it, because I know he almost did, even before he recorded like a Rolling Stone.
Yeah. Hey, well, you're going to be the one that's going to know this answer, because I sure can't find it. Did he ever at any time play that electric guitar with this song, or was it always the acoustic?
You know what? I don't know the answer to that question, but I have seen the footage of him performing it in the mid '60s in England, at the tour where half the audience is booing him. That was the focus of Martin Scorsese's documentary, and he did have an electric guitar strapped on. So probably so.
So were you disappointed like I was when Bob sold his catalog? I thought, I don't want other people to have this. It belongs to Bob.
Nah, there's really not much you can do. The way music is going, I mean, they're all doing it. Springsteen sold. I don't think he sold his whole thing. I think he sold half interest. David Crosby did it before he passed away. I think Neil Young did it. So, these guys got to make money, man. They got people to feed. So, but and in some ways, I'm kind of, because so with Bob puts out a lot of archival stuff, and some others don't, and you'd like to see some of that, So for some, it's probably a good thing. For others, maybe not so much. Wow.
Where can people go to find out more about the book as well as you, and follow you with this Waylon Jennings project?
They can go to my website. It's scottsheaauthor.com, and Shea is spelled SHEA, and it'll link you to all my socials and can give you updates, and you can comment on some of the things I post.
Dude, you got to come back to this show. Please come back to this show anytime in the future.
Absolutely. We'll be pitching you.
All right, man. Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
Thanks, Harry. You too.